I used to believe that love was enough, that if you loved someone deeply, patiently, and completely, everything else would somehow work itself out. That's what I was taught growing up in a small southern town where marriages lasted 50 years. Not because they were always happy, but because people stayed. They endured. My name is Elisa Rocha. I'm 38 years old, I teach elementary school, and for over a decade, I thought I had the kind of marriage people envied. But the truth is, behind every perfect couple photo, behind every Sunday church greeting with my husband holding my hand, there was a woman who cried quietly in the shower. There was a heart slowly breaking in silence. When Andre and I met, I fell hard. He was confident, charming, magnetic, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they were the only one he saw. He had this way of making me feel special, like I was chosen. And for a girl like me, shy, humble, never the center of attention, it felt like a dream I didn't deserve. My friends told me I glowed when I talked about him. My parents, both deeply religious and traditional, approved. And Andre? He knew exactly what to say. "You're everything I prayed for," he told me on our third date. "I want to build a life with you." And I believed him. Our wedding was simple, heartfelt. I wore my mother's lace veil, and Andre cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. At least, I thought they were tears of love. Now, looking back, maybe they were something else. Maybe he cried because he knew who he really was. And what I didn't know yet, the early years of our marriage felt like something out of a movie. We rented a small brick house near the school where I taught, with a porch swing and a kitchen just big enough for the two of us to dance barefoot while dinner was cooking. We laughed. We prayed together. We dreamed. I imagined children, holidays, growing old together. He used to leave me little notes in my lunch bag, call me my queen in front of friends, and text me just to say he missed me. He used to say, "You and me against the world." And I held on to that phrase like it was a promise written in stone. But time has a way of revealing who people really are. And what I didn't know then was that I had married a man who didn't love the way I did. I loved with loyalty. He loved with convenience. It started small, almost unnoticeable. A missed dinner here, a forgotten anniversary there. Things every couple goes through, right? That's what I told myself. He's just stressed. It's just a phase. Marriage isn't a fairy tale, Elisa. Stop expecting perfection. But deep down, I felt it. Something was changing. Not in the way life changes, but in the way someone slowly starts detaching from you. While you're still holding on for dear life. Andre began to come home later. He stopped asking me how my day was. He'd scroll on his phone through dinner, barely looking up when I spoke. And when I did ask for attention, for connection, he'd sigh, irritated. "Elisa, I'm tired. Not everything is about you." That sentence cut deeper than he ever knew. Because everything I did was for us. The cooking, the cleaning, the budgeting, the quiet sacrifices no one ever sees. All for the idea of a shared future. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being shared. And I became just another fixture in the house. Something he passed by without noticing. Still, I clung to hope. I prayed. I fasted. I talked to pastors, read books, listened to podcasts about loving your husband even when he's distant. And every time I told someone about my pain, they gave me the same advice. Be patient. He's a man. He'll come around. But what if he didn't? What if the man I married had never truly been there to begin with? I'll never forget one particular night. It was raining, and I had made his favorite meal, lit candles, tried to recreate those early date nights we used to have. I even put on the red dress he once said made him fall in love with me. He walked in 2 hours late, soaked, smelling like cologne that wasn't his usual. When I opened the door, smiling, his face didn't light up. He looked annoyed. "Why are you all dressed up?" he asked. No kiss, no hug, just that. I told him dinner was ready. He glanced at the table and muttered, "I already ate," and then walked past me, straight to the shower, as if I didn't exist. I stood there, my heels on the wooden floor, mascara running down my cheeks from the rain, and maybe from something deeper too, and I realized I was loving a ghost, a shadow of the man I used to know. I had become invisible in my own home. It wasn't always like that, you know. He used to call me his angel. He used to say I was the reason he got through the hard days. He used to kiss my forehead before leaving for work and text me midday just to say, "I love you." But those days felt like someone else's life now. Like a story I made up to survive the nights I cried alone in our bedroom, with the sound of ESPN playing downstairs and the echo of my own worthlessness growing louder in my head. And the worst part? Everyone thought we were perfect. My students' parents would smile at us in church and say, "Y'all are couple goals." My mother-in-law, sweet and blind, would post photos from Sunday lunch with captions like, "God truly blessed my son with this amazing woman." And I smiled every single time, because I didn't want to break their illusion. Because if I admitted the truth out loud, that my husband had stopped seeing me, stopped cherishing me, stopped loving me, I'd have to face the unbearable reality that I had given everything to a man who only gave me half of himself on a good day. That's the kind of pain you don't talk about. The kind of loneliness that grows not from being alone, but from being forgotten by someone who sleeps beside you every night. So I started shrinking, quietly. I stopped dressing up, stopped buying flowers for the table, stopped waiting by the window at night. I started doing what I had to do to survive: get up, teach, come home, cook, sleep, repeat, numb, robotic, hollow. And yet, I still wore my wedding ring, still kissed his cheek, still said, "I love you," even when he didn't say it back, because somehow I still believed. Somehow, I still hoped. And maybe that's the most dangerous kind of hope, the one that keeps you in places you should have left long ago. The kind that makes you believe that maybe tomorrow he'll remember how much you matter. Maybe next week he'll hold your hand again in public. Maybe someday he'll stop laughing at your pain and start protecting it again. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. And the man who once promised to love me in sickness and in health now looked at me like I was an inconvenience, like I was a burden he regretted carrying. And I began to believe it. If you're watching this and something in your heart is aching, if you know what it feels like to be dismissed, overlooked, emotionally starved, I want you to know you are not crazy. You are not asking for too much. You are simply asking for love that doesn't hurt, love that listens, love that stays. Let me ask you something, and be honest. Have you ever looked at someone you once loved and thought, when did you stop caring? If that question hits you, write it down in the comments. Let's not suffer in silence anymore. Drop this in the comments if this resonates with you. I see myself in this. Your voice matters. Your pain matters. And your healing starts the moment you stop hiding it. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing people don't talk about when they describe emotional abuse. It creeps in like fog. Slow, quiet. You don't even notice it swallowing you until you're already cold and blind, groping for something solid to hold on to. I wish I could tell you there was a moment, a scream, a slap, a broken plate, that marked the beginning of the end. But no, what hurt more than anything was how ordinary it all seemed. That's what made it so terrifying. It looked like nothing from the outside, but on the inside it was eroding me piece by piece. At first, it was the tone of his voice, the way he said my name. Not softly, not with love. Sharp, flat. "Elisa," he'd say, like I was an interruption. Like I was the background noise in a life that no longer interested him. Then came the jokes. Little things he'd say in front of friends about my cooking, my weight, my nagging. Everyone laughed, including me. I laughed so I wouldn't cry, because if I didn't pretend it was funny, I'd be the one ruining the mood. I didn't want to be that wife, the overly sensitive one, the killjoy. He made fun of the way I folded laundry, the way I organized the pantry, the way I sang in the car. "Why do you always sing like you're auditioning for American Idol?" he'd say, rolling his eyes. And I'd laugh, brush it off, tell myself he was just teasing. That's what couples do, right? They tease. But deep down, I started shrinking. I stopped singing. I stopped folding clothes the way I liked. I stopped talking about the things that brought me joy because I knew he'd find a way to twist them into something silly, something small. The shift was so subtle, so insidious, that by the time I realized how deep I was sinking, it felt like I had no air left. I wasn't even allowed to feel sad without it being a joke. If I cried, he'd mimic me. Literally. He'd scrunch up his face and go, "Oh no, Elisa's crying again. Must be that time of the month." And then he'd laugh. A deep, satisfied laugh, like he was proud of himself. Like making me feel worthless was a joke worth telling twice. And I'd just stand there, stunned, swallowing my pain like poison, slowly, silently. I remember one night in particular. I had had a rough day at work. One of my students, a quiet boy named Daniel, had come to me during recess crying because his parents were getting divorced. He didn't understand why. He asked me, "Why do people stop loving each other?" And I didn't know what to say. I carried that weight all day. I came home emotionally drained, looking for comfort, hoping for even a sliver of kindness. I sat on the edge of our bed and told Andre what happened. I poured my heart out. And he looked at me blankly and said, "That's depressing. Can we not talk about this right now? I've had a long day too." That was it. No hug. No, "I'm sorry." No, "That must have been hard." Just dismissal. And then he turned the TV on. I sat there, still in my work clothes, and watched him flip through channels like I hadn't just handed him my heart. That's when I started to learn. My pain was invisible to him. Not just invisible, inconvenient. Sometimes I'd wonder if I was imagining it. Gaslighting is real, you know. When someone makes you feel crazy for reacting like a human being. I'd try to talk to him about how I felt, and he'd respond with things like, "You're always so emotional," or "You take everything so personally." I started second-guessing everything. Was I really too sensitive? Was I asking for too much? Was I broken? I stopped bringing up how I felt altogether, because every time I did, it turned into a fight. He'd say I was attacking him, that I was making him out to be the bad guy. "You love playing the victim," he'd say. And those words, they shattered me. Because I didn't want to be a victim. I just wanted to be seen, heard, loved. And when you're desperate to be loved by someone who keeps pushing you away, you start bargaining with yourself. Maybe if I keep the house cleaner. Maybe if I dress sexier. Maybe if I don't complain so much. Maybe if I lose weight. Maybe if I act more chill, like those women in movies who never cry, never ask for reassurance, never need anything. So I tried. God, I tried. I lost weight. I bought new clothes. I made his favorite meals. I stopped asking questions. I gave him space. But it was never enough. The more I gave, the less I got. And the less I got, the more I blamed myself. That's the cycle no one talks about. The cycle of emotional self-erasure. Of becoming smaller and smaller until you don't even recognize the woman staring back at you in the mirror. There were times I wanted to scream. Times I wanted to shake him and say, "Can't you see me? I'm right here. I'm trying. Why won't you meet me halfway?" But I never did, because I was afraid. Not of him hitting me. He never laid a hand on me. But of the emptiness in his eyes when he looked at me. That dead, flat look that made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. The only time he seemed truly animated was when he was making fun of me. His eyes would light up, his smile wide, his energy magnetic, but only when he had an audience. Friends over for dinner? I was the punchline. A family barbecue? I was the brunt of the joke. "Elisa burned the chicken again," he'd say, even if I hadn't. "She can't tell the difference between cumin and cinnamon." People laughed. I laughed. But inside, I was screaming. And when I tried to talk to him about how humiliating it felt, he'd scoff. "God, Elisa, grow a thicker skin. You're so boring now. You used to be fun." That one stayed with me. You used to be fun. As if my suffering had ruined his entertainment. As if I was a failed performer in the circus of his life. I used to be fun. I used to laugh without fear. I used to dance in the kitchen. I used to write poems. I used to paint. I used to dream. But under his constant mockery, I forgot who I was. I became what he needed me to be, quiet, convenient, compliant. And still, he wasn't satisfied. And it's not just the words he said. It's the words he didn't say. The missed "I love yous," the silence when I cried, the blank stare when I reached for his hand and he pulled away like I was diseased. Do you know what it's like to crave touch from someone who recoils from you? To watch them flinch when you reach out like your love is something they're allergic to? If you do, I see you. And maybe the worst part is how good he was at hiding it. No one believed me when I hinted at how things really were. Andre? No way. He's such a great guy. That's the thing about abusers who don't leave bruises. They wear charm like armor. They make you feel like you're the problem. And everyone else? They buy the performance. They applaud it. I started writing letters I never sent. Pages and pages of things I wished I could say out loud. I'd fold them up and tuck them into my journal like secrets too heavy to carry in daylight. I'd write, "I miss who I used to be. I don't know how much longer I can pretend. Please, God, give me a sign that I'm not crazy." Have you ever written something like that? Or whispered it into the dark when no one was listening? If you have, I want you to write this in the comments. I know what that silence feels like, because the silence is the loudest part of emotional abuse, and it's time we start breaking it. There's a certain kind of quiet that settles over a marriage right before it dies, not the peaceful kind, the kind that buzzes with tension, like a room just after a thunderstorm, when everything smells like wet earth and burnt air. That was my house. Quiet, yes, but only because the screaming had moved inside my head. I had learned how to walk on eggshells so quietly that even my breathing felt like a threat. Andre wasn't angry all the time. That's the thing. If he had been, maybe I would have left sooner. But he was smart. He knew how to mix cruelty with just enough kindness to keep me confused. Some days he'd bring me flowers on the way home. Not because he missed me, but because it would make a good post for his Instagram. "Appreciating my queen," the caption would say. And I'd smile for the picture, because what else was I supposed to do? Say, "Actually, he hasn't touched me in weeks," and laughs when I cry? No one wants to hear that, especially not his mother, who adored me publicly, but dismissed every concern I ever hinted at. "All men are like that," she'd say. "Don't overthink it." Or worse, maybe if you were less emotional, he wouldn't pull away. That one stayed with me. It burrowed in and wrapped itself around my ribs like a second spine. Your emotions are the problem, not the cheating, not the lies. You. And then, the lies started dripping in. Not big, dramatic ones, just small enough to make me doubt myself. "I didn't say that," he'd insist, when I confronted him about something cruel he'd said the day before. "You must have misunderstood." I'd go back through every word in my mind like it was evidence in a trial. I'd check my tone, my timing, my facial expressions. Was I too aggressive? Did I provoke him? Maybe I really had heard it wrong. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you question your own reality. It doesn't come with bruises. It comes with confusion, with guilt, with the suffocating fear that maybe you're the one destroying the marriage simply by reacting to your own pain. It was around that time that I started noticing the messages. Subtle at first. He changed his phone password, turned off previews, took calls in the garage. "Work stuff," he said. Always work stuff. And I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Because the alternative meant accepting that the man I built my life with was betraying me. And I wasn't ready for that. Until one night, I found the proof. I wasn't even looking for it. That's the cruelest part. I wasn't snooping. I was folding laundry while his phone was charging on the counter. A message popped up. I wish I could forget what it said. It was short, casual, laced with intimacy that cut deeper than any knife. "Can't wait to see you again tonight." I stared at it for what felt like forever. My fingers stopped moving. My lungs forgot how to breathe. The air thickened. The lights dimmed. Or maybe it was just me slipping into the kind of shock that numbs everything except the ache in your chest. I didn't open the message. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just stood there. And that's how you know you've been broken slowly over time, when even your discovery of betrayal feels muted. Not a climax. Just another page in a story you've already read 100 times. When Andre walked in later, he kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, asked what was for dinner, talked about his day. And I nodded. I stirred the pot. I asked follow-up questions. Because if I cracked then, I knew I wouldn't be able to stop. Instead, I waited. For 3 days, I pretended I didn't know. I studied him, watched how easily he lied, how effortlessly he slipped into husband mode when it suited him. He laughed louder. He touched me more, probably out of guilt, or maybe out of fear that I'd caught on. And all I kept thinking was, how long has he been doing this? Was it just one woman? Or several? Did they know about me? Did they laugh about me? One night I followed him. He said he was meeting a friend for drinks after work. I kissed his cheek and waved goodbye. 15 minutes later, I was behind the wheel of my sister's car, 2 streets behind him. I knew I shouldn't have done it. I knew it would hurt, but I needed the truth. No more guesswork, no more shadows. He parked at a hotel, not a bar, a cheap, dimly lit hotel on the edge of town. And then she got out of the passenger side, a woman, younger, maybe late 20s, long hair, high heels, laughing, like they were on a date. And I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt empty, like someone had scooped out my insides and replaced them with nothing. He kissed her, right there, in public. Not a quick peck, a real kiss. Passionate, confident, like I didn't exist. And I realized something in that moment that changed everything. He wasn't hiding me from her. He was hiding her from me. That meant she knew. She knew he was married. She knew I was at home. She knew what she was doing, and she didn't care. The betrayal hit me twice. Once from the man I trusted with my life, and again from the woman who, instead of having enough decency to walk away, chose to insert herself into my pain like it was some kind of romantic thrill. That night, I didn't go home. I drove to the lake and sat in silence for hours, watching the water, listening to the wind, trying to figure out when my life had stopped being mine, when I had become a character in someone else's story, a side note, a footnote. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw rocks into the water until my arms gave out. But instead, I wrote. I took out the little journal I kept in my purse and wrote, "He is cheating. She knows. And I am not crazy." I must have written that last line a dozen times. I am not crazy. I am not crazy. I am not crazy. Because when someone gaslights you for long enough, even truth feels like fiction. When I finally went home, the house smelled like cologne. His cologne. The same one I used to love. Now it made me sick. He was in the shower, humming, as if nothing had happened, as if my heart hadn't just shattered into 1,000 pieces. He asked if I wanted to watch a movie, and I almost laughed. Almost. That's when I knew. This wasn't love. This wasn't a marriage. This was emotional warfare, and I was done being the casualty. If you've ever discovered a betrayal so intimate it made you question everything you believed about your life, if you've ever held your pain in silence because you didn't want to be dramatic or clingy, if you've ever whispered to yourself in the dark, "I deserve better than this," then please, let me know I'm not alone. Comment, "I felt this heartbreak too." Because the more we speak, the less power they have. And this story is far from over. After that night, nothing about my house felt like home. The walls were still the same. The furniture hadn't moved, but everything felt hollow, like the air itself had turned hostile. I started noticing how many of my memories were tied to pretending to be happy at family dinners, pretending to laugh at jokes that hurt, pretending I didn't notice the way Andre's eyes drifted to his phone when I was talking. Our whole life together was built on this invisible script where I was the loyal wife, and he was the misunderstood man who just needed space. But now I knew the truth. And the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how comfortable he was inside the lie, how easily he smiled, how casually he lived in a world where I was just optional. Still, I didn't confront him immediately. I wish I could say I stormed into the bathroom that night, held up my journal, screamed, "I know everything." But no, I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I was calculating. Something had shifted in me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't desperate for his love. I wasn't aching for a man who had already left me emotionally years ago. Now, I was just waiting for the right moment. But something unexpected happened during that waiting period. I started seeing how deep the manipulation ran, especially when it came to his mother, Celia. My mother-in-law was the kind of Southern woman people admired. Elegant, God-fearing, always polished. She hosted the best Thanksgiving dinners. She knew every neighbor by name. And she loved Andre fiercely, like he was still 5 years old, like he could do no wrong. To her, I was the perfect wife, the daughter-in-law she prayed for. She would brag to her church friends about how I cooked, how I taught Sunday school, how I handled Andre like a queen. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Every time I tried, she brushed it off. Men have needs, she once said with a tight smile. He works hard. Don't be so hard on him, Elisa. That phrase, don't be so hard on him, played like a broken record in my mind. She didn't see the bruises on my soul. She didn't hear the silence that screamed between us at night. She didn't smell the perfume that wasn't mine on his shirt. To her, Andre was a good man, and I was lucky to have him. One afternoon, I sat across from her at her kitchen table. She had made sweet tea, her signature. We were talking about nothing, weather, church, the price of eggs. And then, she leaned in and asked me, "Is everything okay with you two? You seem tired lately." I froze. My hands tightened around the glass. This was my opening. But something in me hesitated. Not because I didn't want to tell her the truth, but because I knew she wouldn't believe me. So I smiled, nodded, said, "Just work. End of the school year always drains me." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "You're a blessing to this family, Elisa. Don't ever forget that." And I almost laughed. A blessing. I was a band-aid on a bullet wound, a pretty ornament in a rotten house. That day, I made a decision. If no one was going to see the truth, I would show them. But first, I needed more. More than a hotel kiss. More than a suspicious text. I needed a crack so wide even Celia couldn't ignore it, and it came faster than I expected. A few weeks later, I was at the grocery store, picking up ingredients for her birthday dinner. I had planned something small and personal, just the three of us. Her favorite lemon chicken, green beans with almonds, and a pecan pie from the bakery she loved. It was tradition. I had done it every year since Andre and I got married, but that day, as I turned the corner near the frozen foods aisle, I heard a laugh. That laugh, her laugh, the woman from the hotel. She was standing a few feet away, talking to someone on the phone, loud and carefree, dressed like she had nothing to hide. I ducked behind a display of frozen pizzas, heart racing. I couldn't see her face clearly, but her voice was unmistakable. I stood there, hidden, listening, and then I heard it. "His wife has no idea. She thinks he's working late tonight." Laughter. "And I'm meeting his mom next week. Can you believe that? She actually thinks I'm just a co-worker." My blood turned to ice. She was meeting Celia. Andre had brought her into my life, my home, my family. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. Not with rage, but with clarity. I left the store without finishing my shopping, drove home in silence, sat in the car for 20 minutes, staring at the garage door, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of truth. She was coming into my world, and I was going to let her, but not the way they expected. I began to plan, carefully, strategically. I'd invite Celia for dinner, just like every year. I'd cook her favorite dishes, set the table with the best plates, light candles, smile, and then I'd invite the mistress too. Yes, her. She wanted to meet the mother-in-law? Let's meet. Let's all sit together at the table and toast to the lies. I crafted the message carefully, friendly, casual, no hint of confrontation. "Hey, I've heard a lot about you. Since you're meeting Celia soon anyway, why don't we do a little dinner together? Come by on Friday. I'd love to talk." She responded within minutes. A laughing emoji. Bold move. Sure. Why not? And just like that, it was set. The date, the time, the players. Andre, of course, didn't know. I told him Celia was coming and that I wanted it to be a surprise. Told him to come home at 7, dress nicely. "No problem," he said, texting as usual, not looking at me. He had no idea the stage was being set, that the mask he wore so confidently was about to be torn off in front of the one woman who still believed in his goodness. I spent all Friday preparing, cooking, cleaning, setting the table like it was a holiday. The house looked beautiful. The air smelled like garlic and rosemary. The wine was chilling. At 6:45, Celia arrived, carrying a gift bag and wearing pearls. At 6:52, the doorbell rang again. I opened it. And there she was, the other woman, wearing red, smiling like the devil dressed for dinner. Celia stood from the couch, confused. "Oh, hello, dear." I didn't know we were expecting anyone else. And that's when I said it. Calmly. Clearly. This is Madison, Andre's girlfriend. Silence. The kind that swallows entire rooms whole. I watched the color drain from Celia's face. And Madison? She laughed. A soft, smug little laugh, but the laughter wouldn't last. Because what happened next would leave them both speechless. And Andre? Well, he hadn't even walked in yet. If you're still with me, I want to hear from you. Tell me, have you ever been forced to smile through a lie just to keep the peace? Have you ever held your pain behind your teeth just to protect someone else's illusion? Comment. I've been the peacekeeper while I was bleeding inside. Let's talk about the pain we hide. Let's break the silence, together. I watched it happen in slow motion, like a scene from one of those movies where everything freezes except your heartbeat. Madison stepped inside, hips swaying with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, and Celia, my mother-in-law, still clutching her birthday gift bag, stared at her like she was trying to make sense of a language she'd never heard before. My words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had just started. This is Madison, Andre's girlfriend. No one spoke. The clock in the kitchen ticked, tick, tick. Madison smiled. That smug, unbothered smile of someone who has nothing to lose. Nice to finally meet you, Celia, she said, holding out her hand like this was a business meeting, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb into the middle of a family. Celia didn't take the hand. She didn't blink. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She turned to me slowly, like maybe I had lost my mind. Elisa, what is this? I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply said, this is the truth. The one you didn't want to see. And that's when the front door opened. Andre walked in, whistling, keys jangling in his hand. He was dressed up, finally listening for once. A pressed shirt, clean-shaven. That cologne I used to associate with nights of slow dancing and whispered promises. He stepped into the living room and froze. His smile collapsed so fast it looked painful. His eyes darted from Madison to Celia to me, like a child caught red-handed. No one moved. For a full 10 seconds, we were statues in a museum of betrayal. And then, Madison spoke. You didn't tell me your mom would be here. Her voice had a blade in it. Or your wife. Andre dropped his keys. Literally. They hit the hardwood floor with a metallic thud. This isn't... What the hell is going on? He stammered, stepping forward like he could somehow rearrange the scene, undo what had been done. You tell me, I said, still standing by the door, still steady. You said you were working late. She said she was meeting your mom next week. I figured I'd save you the trouble. His eyes were wild, desperate. Elisa, can we talk? Alone? I almost laughed. Alone. Like the damage hadn't already been dragged into the light. Like the shame still had somewhere to hide. Madison rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You lied to both of us. Don't act like you're the victim now. Celia sat down, her face pale, her fingers trembling. She didn't speak. And for the first time, I saw something crack in her. Not just shock, not just embarrassment, grief. Because for all her blindness, she loved her son. She had built him into this version of a man she could be proud of. And now, she was watching that version unravel right in front of her, thread by thread, with each second that passed. Andre tried to sit beside her. She pulled away. I saw the betrayal on her face, not just in what he did to me, but in what he did to her legacy, her name, her trust. She had raised him to be better, or so she thought. And I just stood there, not broken, not destroyed, free. Because sometimes the truth doesn't break you. It unchains you. I didn't want to believe it, I said, finally turning to Celia. I made excuses. I prayed. I blamed myself. I waited. I begged. And still, he chose this, over and over. Celia looked at me then, really looked at me. For the first time she saw it, the years behind my eyes, the nights I cried into pillows, the smiles I forced at family dinners, the pieces of myself I had given away in silence, all in the name of a marriage that only I was holding on to. She nodded once, just once, and then she turned to her son. You disgust me, she said, quiet, sharp, final. And Andre? He didn't fight. Because deep down, I think even he knew it was over. Madison backed away, clearly realizing she had walked into something far bigger than she anticipated. "I didn't sign up for all this drama," she muttered, grabbing her purse. "I thought this was just a fling." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She turned and left, didn't even close the door behind her. Andre stood in the doorway, staring after her, torn between chasing the girl who fed his ego and begging the family he had just shattered for forgiveness. He did neither. He just stood there, empty. Celia excused herself quietly, walked past him, and out the front door without another word. The gift bag still on the table, unopened. The candles flickering, the food untouched. And suddenly, it was just us. Husband and wife, liar and survivor. He looked at me with those same eyes that once made promises. "Elisa, No," I said. Not loudly, not bitterly, just firmly. "No more excuses, no more lies. I gave you everything. My loyalty, my youth, my love. And you treated it like garbage." He stepped toward me. "Please, just let me explain." "There's nothing left to explain," I whispered. "You made your choice, over and over." He reached for me, and for the first time in years, I stepped back. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was clear. I didn't owe him anything. Not my tears, not my forgiveness, not my time. He stood there watching me, as if realizing too late that the woman who once begged for his attention had vanished. In her place stood someone else, someone who no longer feared him, someone who didn't need his love to feel whole, someone free. If you've ever stood face to face with someone who shattered you and found the strength to stand tall anyway, if you've ever looked betrayal in the eye and chosen yourself, I want you to speak up. Comment, "I choose me." Let it be known. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a voice that refuses to be silenced. After he left, the silence in the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt abandoned. There's a strange kind of quiet that fills the space after someone you once loved walks out for the last time. It's not the kind that soothes or rests. It's the kind that buzzes in your ears like static. You think you'll feel relief, that maybe all the tension will release. But instead, it settles like dust in the air, clinging to your skin, crawling under your fingernails. I stood in the middle of the living room, the candle flame still flickering, the food untouched, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my own aloneness. He was gone. But so was the version of me who tolerated being unloved. Still, I didn't cry. Not that night. My body was too tired, my soul too numb. I sat down at the dinner table, right where Celia had been just an hour earlier. Her water glass was still half full, her napkin still folded on her lap. I reached for the fork and stared at the plate of lemon chicken I'd made with so much care, and I remember thinking, how many meals did I cook for a man who wasn't even hungry for me anymore? I didn't eat. I just sat there. For hours. I think I needed to feel every inch of the emptiness, not to be dramatic, not to wallow. But because I had spent so many years pretending things weren't as bad as they were, that now, with the truth sitting beside me like a guest that wouldn't leave, I had no choice but to face it. He had betrayed me. He had humiliated me. But the part that haunted me most was that I let him. Not once, not twice, but over and over, I silenced my own voice to keep his image intact. I lied to myself so he could keep lying to everyone else. And now that he was gone, I didn't know who I was anymore. The next morning, I woke up and the bed felt too big. I rolled over and instinctively reached for the space where he used to sleep. And when my hand met cold sheets, something inside me cracked. Not from missing him, but from the memory of how many nights I had done that exact thing, even while he was still with me. The truth was, I had been sleeping alone for years. I just hadn't accepted it. Grief doesn't always come in tears. Sometimes it comes in the way your toothbrush sits untouched, or how his shoes are still by the door, like he might walk in any second, or how the closet still smells like his cologne. That same scent you once wore on your skin like a badge of love. I walked through the house like a ghost of myself, touching things, cleaning things, moving slowly, as if I could rearrange my reality with enough Windex and folded laundry. People think that when a woman leaves, or when she's finally left, there's some kind of instant empowerment, that she throws her head back and laughs and goes out with friends and reinvents herself overnight. But that's not how it works. It's quiet, it's isolating, it's terrifying, and it's full of doubt. Because even though I knew I had done the right thing, there was still a voice, small but persistent, that asked, what if you never find someone else? What if this was the best you'll ever get? What if you were the problem all along? That voice had been planted by years of gaslighting, of being told I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. And it didn't disappear just because the liar had. I spent the next week in a fog. I went to work, smiled at my students, answered emails, cleaned the house. On the outside, I was functioning, but inside, I was unraveling. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't know how to live without the role I had been playing for so long. I was no longer his wife, but I wasn't quite myself either. I was something in between, a woman in transition, a heart in recovery. One afternoon, about 10 days after the dinner, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, really looking. Not just glancing to put on mascara or check for wrinkles. I looked. I studied the curve of my face, the lines by my mouth, the sadness in my eyes. And then, I took off my ring. It felt ceremonial, sacred, like a burial. I placed it in a small dish on my dresser, beside old earrings and dried-up perfume bottles, and I whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what I'll never accept again." Because I didn't leave empty-handed. I left with clarity. I left with scars that knew how to speak. I left with a voice I had spent years burying beneath obedience. That weekend, I cleared out the closet. I packed his things, every shirt, every sock, every lie that smelled like lavender and deceit. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I folded each piece with the kind of finality that only comes when you've truly let go. And when the closet was empty, I sat inside it, cross-legged, back against the wall, and I exhaled, deeply, fully, for the first time in years. Because healing doesn't always start with therapy or yoga or journals. Sometimes it starts in the stillness, in the quiet hum of your own breath reminding you, you're still here. You survived. You can rebuild. If you've ever had to start over from a place of emotional wreckage, if you've ever sat in a silent room and wondered who you are now without the person who broke you, I want you to comment this below. This pain will not define me. Say it. Write it. Own it. Because this chapter might be painful, but it's not the ending. We keep going. There's a strange kind of grief that comes with healing. No one really prepares you for that. You expect the pain to leave all at once, like a heavy coat you finally take off after a long winter. But it doesn't work like that. Healing comes in waves. Small ones, quiet ones, sometimes so subtle you don't even notice the progress until you look back and realize you don't cry in the shower anymore. After the closet was cleared and the ring was off, there was this eerie stillness in my life. My house was quiet. My phone didn't light up with his name. There were no more fake apologies, no more guilt-soaked affection, no more trying to read between the lines of silence. But instead of feeling relief, I felt untethered, like someone had cut the last string holding me in place. For years, I had built my world around Andre, not because he earned it, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't know I was allowed to build a world around myself. I thought love meant orbiting someone else. That being a good wife meant dimming my light so his could shine brighter. And now that he was gone, I had to face a terrifying question. What do I want? The truth? I didn't know. I didn't know what food I liked without asking if he was in the mood for it. I didn't know what music made me feel alive anymore, because I had stopped playing it out loud years ago when he started calling my playlists too sad. I didn't even know what it meant to rest without guilt. So I started small. I gave myself permission to not be okay. I let the dishes pile up for a day. I ate cereal for dinner. I sat on the couch and stared at nothing. And for once, I didn't rush to fill the silence with noise. At night, I still curled up on my side of the bed, my body so used to shrinking that I had forgotten how much space I was allowed to take up. But one night, maybe a week later, I rolled into the middle. I stretched my arms and legs out wide like a starfish, claiming every inch of that mattress. And I cried, not from sadness, but from a deep, aching relief. This space is mine now. During the day, I went on long walks, not to get anywhere, not to exercise, just to feel something. I watched the trees change, the wind stir the leaves, and I remembered how much beauty lives in the small, quiet things. I started noticing strangers more, how they smiled at their dogs, how they held hands on benches, how they laughed into their phones without apology. And instead of feeling bitter or lonely, I felt curious. Could I have that again? Not with someone else, but with myself? I started writing again. Not journals full of pain, not letters I'd never send, but me. Thoughts, poems, little reflections. I scribbled things like, I miss the woman I was before I needed to be strong. I deserve mornings filled with peace, not panic. I am allowed to want more. Some days, I believed those words. Other days, I didn't. But I wrote them anyway, because writing them made them real, even if only for a moment. Celia texted me once, just once. She said, I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. You didn't deserve that. I hope you know how proud I am of you. It wasn't long. It wasn't flowery, but it meant everything. Not because I needed her validation, but because for years I thought I was invisible. And now, someone who once dismissed my pain had finally acknowledged it. That kind of recognition doesn't erase the wounds, but it puts a little salve on them. People started asking questions too. At church, at work, at the grocery store. Where's Andre? Everything okay? I didn't lie. I didn't give them the details. But I said it. We're separated. And with every repetition of that sentence, I felt less ashamed. Less like a woman who had failed, and more like a woman who had chosen herself. Still, the nights were the hardest. Evenings stretch longer when you're alone. There's something about that hour when the sun is gone, but the stars haven't fully arrived yet. That liminal space between light and dark that makes your heart ache louder. I'd sit on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, sipping tea, watching the world wind down, and I'd whisper, "What now?" Sometimes I'd replay old conversations in my mind, the good ones, the tender ones. Because even in toxic love, there are still soft moments, and letting go of someone doesn't mean forgetting those. It means honoring them without clinging, grieving without romanticizing, letting them float away like paper boats on a stream, grateful, but released. One evening, I ran into a former student's mother at the pharmacy. She asked how I was. I gave the usual polite nod, the small smile, and then she said something that stopped me cold. I just want to say, I don't know what you're going through, but I see something different in your eyes, like you're coming back. Not reinvented, not brand new, just back to myself, back to the woman who used to sing in the car without fear of being mocked. Back to the girl who once dreamed of traveling alone, of painting sunsets, of falling asleep to audiobooks and waking up with coffee in bed. Back to me. That night, I went home and did something I hadn't done in years. I danced in my kitchen with bare feet and no music. Just me and the sound of my own heartbeat, steady and soft. And I didn't do it for anyone else. I wasn't performing. I was returning. Little by little, I started making promises to myself. I promised I would never again apologize for needing love that feels safe. I promised I would never dim my joy just to make someone else feel comfortable. I promised I would ask for what I need, even if my voice shakes. And most of all, I promised I would not go silent again. Because that's what healing is. It's not just surviving what broke you. It's choosing every day to rebuild with tenderness, to live with intention, to love yourself fiercely, even on the days you feel unworthy. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up, if you've ever looked in the mirror and whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore," but kept showing up anyway, then please comment this below. I'm finding my way back to me. Let's speak that into existence, together. Because this journey, it's just beginning. There's a certain kind of strength that doesn't come from fighting. It comes from not fighting, from walking away instead of trying to prove your worth, from choosing your peace over being right. I didn't always understand that kind of strength. I used to think being strong meant enduring more pain, holding it in, staying even when everything in you wanted to leave. But now I know, true strength is gentle, quiet. It's the moment you choose yourself, even when your whole body still misses what broke you. The mornings became easier before the nights did. I'd wake up without panic, without the weight of anticipating an argument, or worse, pretending everything was fine just to keep the peace. There was no more waiting for a phone that wouldn't ring, or hoping for a version of him that only existed in my memories. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I was walking barefoot on my own terms, and each step, though shaky, felt like a declaration. I am still here. I began to create small rituals, things just for me. Coffee on the balcony, not rushed, not cold, not interrupted. Scented candles in the bathroom while I soaked in silence. I started writing post-it notes and sticking them on the fridge, the mirror, the inside of drawers. Little affirmations like, "You are not hard to love. Your feelings matter. You are not too much." They were whispers at first, just trying to drown out the voice that had lived in my head for too long. His voice, the one that made me question everything about myself. I replaced it with my own. And slowly, my home started to feel different, warmer, safer, lighter. I took down the photos from the hallway, not in anger, not in revenge, but because they didn't belong in my story anymore. They were chapters I had closed, faces I no longer recognized. I replaced them with artwork, prints I found online that made me feel something. A painting of a woman standing in the rain, face lifted to the sky. Another of a sunflower growing through concrete. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about reclaiming space, taking back the walls that once held secrets and turning them into something that breathed truth. People kept reaching out, some with concern, some with curiosity. "You're glowing," a friend said during a brunch we hadn't shared in years. "What's different?" And I smiled. Not to please, not to deflect, just smiled. Because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain my happiness or apologize for it. I wasn't performing anymore. One afternoon, I cleaned out my inbox. Hundreds of old messages, birthday wishes, grocery lists. "Don't wait up. Working late. Where did you put my charger?" I read through some of them, but most I just deleted without opening. It felt like shedding skin, like deleting ghosts. One message stood out, though. It was from months earlier, a draft I had written but never sent. It read, "I know you're lying, and it's killing me, but I don't want to believe it, because if I do, it means I wasted all these years." I stared at that message for a long time. My hand hovered over delete, and then I hit send. Not to him, but to myself. I printed it, folded it, slipped it into my journal. Not because I wanted to relive the pain, but because it reminded me how far I'd come, that I did believe it, that I walked through the fire and survived. One day, I saw him again, at the grocery store, of all places. He was at the end of an aisle, looking at cereal. He didn't see me right away, but I saw him, and in that split second, my body froze. Not from fear, but from memory. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just watched him. This man who once made me question my worth. This man who thought I'd never leave. And when he finally looked up and met my eyes, I saw it. The shock, the guilt, the regret. But what I didn't see? Control. He didn't have it anymore. I smiled, nodded, and walked away. That moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, it changed something. It was proof that healing isn't always a loud, dramatic scene. Sometimes it's as quiet as choosing not to engage, as simple as walking past the pain like it no longer lives in you. Boundaries became my new language. Not walls, not barriers, just clarity. I started saying no to things that drained me, no to conversations that left me feeling empty, no to people who only called when they needed something, and yes, to solitude, yes to slow mornings, yes to my own damn voice. I had spent years believing I was hard to love, but I wasn't. I was just surrounded by people who didn't know how to love someone who knew how to feel deeply. And now, I was learning to love myself in that exact way. Soft, steady, unapologetic. I stopped chasing closure. Because I realized sometimes closure isn't something you get from them. Sometimes closure is deciding that you're not waiting for them to feel sorry anymore. That you're not begging for understanding from someone who doesn't even understand themselves. And in that space, you heal in unexpected ways. Like the way I started to laugh again. Really laugh. The kind that shakes your shoulders and makes your eyes water. It happened one night while watching an old movie on the couch. I can't even remember the joke, but I remember the feeling. Like my body was remembering joy. Like my soul was stretching after a long sleep. If you've ever been in a place where you couldn't even imagine joy, where laughter felt foreign or forced, but somehow found your way back to it, even for just a second, I want you to write this in the comments. I laughed again, and it felt like freedom. Write it. Feel it. Because these moments matter. They are proof that you are not your pain. You are the person who walks out of it. And if you're still healing, still figuring it out, still stumbling your way through the dark, I want you to know this. You're not late. You're not behind. You are becoming exactly as you should. There's something sacred about waking up and no longer feeling like you're surviving, just breathing. No dread. No hollow pit in your chest. No mental calculations of how to keep someone from being disappointed in you before the day even begins. Just breath. Just space. Just the stillness of peace you had forgotten how to crave. I started dreaming again. Quietly at first. Nothing extravagant. But there was this flicker in my chest, like a pilot light that had never fully gone out, just buried under all the soot and silence. I'd be brushing my teeth and I'd catch myself thinking, maybe I could go back to school. Or maybe I could start a blog, write the kind of stories I needed to hear when I was drowning in silence. Maybe I could take that solo trip I always talked about but never dared to book. It felt strange, allowing myself to imagine. For so long, my dreams were wrapped around someone else, tied to his schedule, his moods, his plans, and now they belonged to me again. I was scared, if I'm being honest, because when you finally step out of someone else's shadow, the light can feel too bright. You squint, you flinch, you wonder if you're allowed to stay. But I stayed. I stayed in the discomfort of not having all the answers. I stayed in the awkward pauses of rebuilding. I stayed even when it would have been easier to run back to what was familiar. And in that staying, I started discovering who I really was underneath all the performance. I signed up for a pottery class. It sounds random, I know, but I remember seeing an ad on a bulletin board at the grocery store, and something in me whispered, try. So I did, and I was terrible. The clay would collapse in my hands. My first bowl looked more like a crumpled hat than anything usable, but I laughed, and the teacher laughed with me. No judgment, no pressure, just messy, imperfect joy. I made a habit of trying new things. One day it was Thai food. Another it was hiking alone, something I used to fear. I'd pack a small backpack, take a trail just outside of town, and spend hours walking, thinking, breathing. And somewhere between the trees and the wind and the sound of my footsteps on gravel, I started to feel whole. Not fixed, not flawless, but whole. I also started to attract different kinds of people. Women who had been through fire and didn't hide their ashes. Men who listened more than they spoke. Strangers who smiled without wanting anything in return. I began to realize that when you stop dimming your light to make others comfortable, you start to draw in people who don't need you to shrink. And then, one afternoon, I met someone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a whirlwind. It wasn't even romantic at first. We were both standing in line at a bookstore. I dropped a book. He picked it up. We talked for maybe 3 minutes. But when I walked away, I had that strange feeling in my stomach. Not butterflies exactly, but something quieter. A stillness, a softness. He didn't ask for my number. I didn't offer it. But 2 weeks later, I saw him again. Same bookstore, different day. This time, we talked longer. About books, about travel, about how much he hated small talk and how refreshing it was to meet someone who wasn't in a rush to impress. There was no pressure, no game, just ease. I didn't tell him about Andre, not yet. I didn't tell him about the betrayal, the heartbreak, the night I invited the mistress to dinner, because that wasn't the foundation I wanted to build anything on. I wanted to be seen for who I was now, not for the wounds I carried. And when I finally did tell him, weeks later, he listened. Not with pity, not with solutions, just presence. Just, "I'm really sorry you went through that. You didn't deserve it." That sentence, it undid something in me. Because even though I had said it to myself, even though I knew it deep down, hearing it from someone who had nothing to gain, it hit differently. Still, I was careful. Not closed off, but cautious. I had learned the hard way that love isn't proven in grand gestures. It's in the consistency, the respect, the way someone makes you feel safe enough to be exactly who you are. And I was in no rush. I was dating me first. I was prioritizing the woman who had stayed when it was hardest, who had cried through the nights and still showed up for her life. I was learning how to ask myself, does this make me feel seen? Does this feel like truth? Am I betraying myself to keep the peace? If the answer was yes, I walked away. No hesitation, no guilt. That was the difference now. Before, I would rationalize, I would excuse. I would say, he's just tired, or it's not that serious. But now, I honored every gut feeling, every red flag, every whisper in my spirit that said, this is not love. Because once you've tasted your own power, you don't trade it for scraps. I started spending time with women who inspired me. Survivors, dreamers, creators, women who had built businesses after heartbreak, women who had walked away from 10-year marriages and started over at 50, women who cried on the kitchen floor and still got up and made breakfast for their kids. We shared stories, swapped resources, held space for one another in ways that felt sacred. There's nothing like being witnessed by someone who's walked your path. It reminded me, I wasn't alone. I was never alone. And if you're reading this, if you've ever had to rebuild your entire identity after someone tried to erase you, if you've ever had to start from zero with shaky hands and a bruised heart, know this, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. And that is the bravest thing a person can do. If this part of the story speaks to your soul, if you're in the middle of rediscovering your dreams, if you've started asking yourself, what do I want you to comment this. I'm building a life that feels like mine. Because you are. And that life? It's already starting. There was a moment, a quiet, slow one, when I looked around my home and didn't recognize it as a place of survival anymore. It had become something different. Not just cleaner or more decorated, not just more organized or aesthetically pleasing. It had become mine, not because of what was in it, but because of what I no longer allowed to linger inside of it. No more tension in the air, no more tiptoeing around moods, no more silence that screamed at me louder than any insult ever could. I had built peace from the rubble, and it was sacred. I learned that peace wasn't always pretty. It wasn't always soft music and scented candles. Sometimes peace looked like blocking a number without explanation. Sometimes it sounded like silence when I chose not to respond to a message that once would have derailed my day. Sometimes peace was choosing not to explain myself, not to convince someone of my worth, not to shrink when I was finally learning to take up space again. Boundaries became my love language, not because I hated people, but because I finally loved myself enough to protect what I was rebuilding. I no longer entertained chaos just because I was used to noise. I no longer said yes when my soul screamed no. I stopped showing up for people who never showed up for me. And yes, some people walked away. But what I realized, peace is not the absence of people. It's the presence of clarity. There was a time I feared being alone, not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of aloneness where no one checks in, no one fills the gaps, no one tells you who you are. I used to fear that silence because I thought it meant something was wrong with me. But now I crave that kind of silence, because in it, I found my truth. I found the parts of me that had gone quiet, the parts I pushed down to avoid confrontation, the voice I softened so he wouldn't feel threatened, the dreams I dismissed because they didn't align with his plans. Alone, I found them again, not all at once, but slowly, patiently, tenderly. I had been so used to being overexposed, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. Everything I had was always available to him. My time, my body, my thoughts, my kindness, and he treated it like an unlimited resource. But now, I was learning to be intentional. Not everyone gets access. Not everyone gets to know my softness. Not everyone is safe enough to witness my healing. I became okay with being misunderstood. That was the hardest part. Because I used to want so badly for people to understand my pain. I used to over-explain, overshare, over-apologize. But healing taught me that understanding isn't required for closure. You don't need their agreement to honor your truth. You don't need their permission to move forward. One afternoon, I walked into a coffee shop I hadn't visited in years. The barista still remembered my order. "You disappeared," she said, smiling. I smiled back. I had to. Because sometimes disappearing isn't about hiding. It's about retreating, healing, rebuilding. I hadn't disappeared. I had returned to myself. And when I stepped out of that invisible cocoon, I wasn't the same. I didn't need to be loud to feel seen. I didn't need to be needed to feel valuable. I had changed. My standards had changed. What I tolerated had changed. I no longer felt guilty for letting people down when choosing myself. I stopped fearing loneliness and started fearing self-abandonment. Because let me tell you something, there's nothing lonelier than lying next to someone who makes you feel invisible. I started to enjoy my own company in ways that surprised me. I'd take myself out to dinner, order dessert first, bring a book, and savor every bite. I wasn't waiting for someone to show up and make me feel special. I was doing it for myself. I was done waiting for flowers. I bought my own. I was done hoping someone would call. I called myself back into existence. There's a power in choosing solitude over chaos. There's freedom in deciding that your peace matters more than someone else's comfort. There's liberation in no longer being the emotional punching bag for someone else's unhealed wounds. I stopped chasing apologies I'd never receive. I stopped trying to explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. And I stopped feeling guilty for being hard to manipulate. Because once you start choosing yourself, you realize how many people only loved the version of you they could control. That realization hit me the hardest one night when I stumbled upon an old voicemail from Andre. It was short, apologetic, vague. He didn't say much, just that he hoped I was okay and that he missed me. I didn't cry, I didn't feel anger, just emptiness. Because the woman who would have clung to those breadcrumbs, she no longer lived here. That voicemail wasn't for me. It was for the version of me he thought still existed. But she had died. And in her place, a woman who didn't settle for half-truths, a woman who didn't confuse manipulation for love, a woman who didn't romanticize pain just to feel something. So I deleted it. Not in rage, not in defiance, but in peace. And I sat in my living room, phone on silent, candles burning low, and I whispered to myself, "You're safe now." Because I was. And if you've ever reached that quiet moment where you realized you no longer needed their apology to sleep at night, if you've ever chosen solitude over chaos, peace over performance, stillness over suffering, I want you to say it loud in the comments. My peace is my power. Type it. Own it. Let it be a promise to yourself. Because this part of your life, this chapter where you reclaim everything that was once taken from you, it's just getting started. There's a moment in healing, not loud, not dramatic, when you start to feel something shift deep within you. Not because someone came to save you, not because the pain suddenly vanished, but because you began listening again, not to the noise around you, not to the voices of those who doubted you, but to that quiet, steady whisper inside your own chest. It had been there the whole time, but trauma makes you forget. It makes you doubt your gut, mute your intuition, and question every instinct until you're too afraid to even trust your own heartbeat. For years, I'd lived disconnected from that inner voice. Every decision filtered through someone else's opinion. Every step second-guessed in fear of judgment or rejection. I wasn't living. I was performing. Numb. Out of rhythm with myself. But now, the noise was gone. And in the quiet, my spirit started to speak again. At first, it was subtle. Like walking into a room and realizing something feels off, even if nothing looks wrong. That's how I started navigating the world again. Feeling it, tuning in, honoring the tightness in my stomach, the tension in my chest, the goosebumps on my arms, not as random reactions, but as messages, warnings. confirmations. I started calling it my knowing. It was more than logic, more than emotion. It was the part of me that had survived even when I didn't realize I was fighting for my life. And the more I trusted it, the louder it got. I remember one morning I woke up before the sun, no alarm, just awake. And I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel dread. I felt drawn. So I got up, made tea, and sat by the window. The sky was just starting to shift from black to deep blue. The world was quiet. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Presence. Not distraction. Not worry. Just me. Here. Now. I whispered a prayer. Not to anyone in particular. Just to the universe. To God. To whoever had been holding me together when I didn't have the strength to hold myself. Thank you, I said. That was it. Thank you for not letting me drown. Thank you for helping me leave. Thank you for bringing me back to myself. And from that day forward, I started carving out space for that kind of stillness. Not because I wanted to be spiritual, but because I needed it. I needed to feel connected to something bigger than my pain. Something ancient. Something steady. I started meditating, not in the way the internet teaches, with apps and mantras and timers, but in my own way, sitting quietly, breathing deeply, listening to what my body had to say. Sometimes I cried, sometimes I smiled, sometimes I just sat there, heartbeat steady, hands open, letting the silence wrap around me like a blanket. I also started noticing signs, little things, a feather on my windowsill, a song playing in the car that felt like it was meant just for me, repeating numbers on the clock, a phrase someone said that echoed a thought I'd written the night before. It wasn't superstition, it was alignment. It was life speaking back to me after I'd finally started paying attention. And I held on to those signs like breadcrumbs, not because I was lost, but because they reminded me I was exactly where I needed to be. I stopped rushing, stopped trying to force clarity, stopped demanding answers from life, and started asking better questions. What do I need in this moment? What is this trying to teach me? Does this path feel like truth? Not every answer came quickly. Some didn't come at all. But the power wasn't in the answer. It was in the asking. It was in trusting that my questions were sacred, that my journey didn't need to make sense to anyone else to be valid. I also forgave myself, not all at once, but piece by piece, for staying too long, for loving someone who hurt me, for silencing myself, for not knowing better when I was doing my best. Forgiveness wasn't a one-time thing. It was daily. It was choosing to meet myself with compassion instead of shame. It was choosing softness when the old version of me would have spiraled into guilt. And it was hard, because shame is seductive. It convinces you that you deserved the pain, that you asked for it, that your worth is tied to your suffering. But shame is a liar, and I refused to let it drive anymore. I started writing again, not just journaling, but writing letters to parts of myself I had abandoned. To the girl who felt invisible, to the woman who tried so hard to hold it all together, to the soul inside me that had screamed for rescue and finally pulled herself to safety. And I wrote to my future self too, not with fear, but with hope, with fire, with belief, because I was no longer surviving. I was returning to my instincts, returning to faith. Returning to the woman I was before the world convinced her she had to be small to be loved. And if you've ever felt that, like your intuition was buried under years of noise, like your spirit was whispering to you and you just started listening again, like you're finally reclaiming your voice, your rhythm, your divinity, I want you to type this in the comments. I trust myself again. Say it, write it, let it be a vow. Because no one else gets to tell you what truth feels like in your body. No one else gets to define your healing. And no one has the power to disconnect you from the divine wisdom that lives inside your soul. There's a strange, almost holy silence that arrives when you realize you made it. Not by accident, not by someone pulling you out, but by your own hands, your own tears, your own faith that refused to die, even in the darkest, coldest corners of your life. I look around now and I don't see ruins. I see foundations. I see a home that reflects me, a rhythm that feels like mine, a life no longer borrowed or broken, but fully lived, fully chosen. It didn't happen all at once. There were setbacks, relapses in confidence, mornings where I woke up in old pain, forgetting momentarily how far I'd come. Nights when doubt crept in through the cracks, whispering, maybe you're still not enough. But I didn't listen for long. Because somewhere between the heartbreak and the healing, I stopped looking for rescue and became the one who saves me. I became my own sanctuary, and in that place, no one else holds the keys. I've learned to celebrate the smallest things. Waking up rested, laughing at a joke I made to myself, dancing in the kitchen to a song from my childhood, sending a message and not overthinking it, setting a boundary and not apologizing for it, looking in the mirror and seeing a woman I recognize. That is everything. And maybe you're there too. Or maybe you're on your way. Maybe you're somewhere in between, still hurting, still doubting, still wondering if it gets better. I won't lie to you. Healing is messy. It's not linear. Some days it feels like you're making no progress at all. But then, one day, without fanfare or fireworks, you realize the pain isn't in charge anymore. You are. You choose when to rest. You choose who gets access. You choose joy, not as a reward, but as your birthright. And let me tell you, that kind of freedom, it changes everything. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving anything. It's about peace, the deep, quiet kind. The kind you don't need to post about or explain or justify. It lives in your breath, in your choices, in your refusal to settle for less than what sets your soul on fire. Today, I smile differently. I don't hide my scars. I don't shrink when I speak. I don't wait for permission to be proud of how far I've come. Because everything I lost led me to everything I was always meant to reclaim. And I know now that heartbreak wasn't my ending. It was my unveiling, a sacred shedding, a beautiful becoming. So if you've come this far in my story, if you've walked beside me through the pain, the silence, the fire, the rising, thank you. Your presence here means more than you know. And if you're still here, still reading, still feeling every word in your bones, I want to ask you something deeply personal. Would you leave a comment below and type these words? I choose peace over pain. Type it, not just for me, but for you. Let it be your declaration, your commitment, your closing prayer to this chapter. And if this video held your hand through something difficult, please take a moment right now to leave a like, not just for the algorithm, but to honor your own journey. And if you haven't yet, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to this channel. Here, we tell stories like this one, raw, real, unfiltered. Stories that reflect the silent strength in all of us. Stories that hold space for healing. Because your healing matters. Your voice matters. You matter. And finally, before you go, there's another story waiting for you. One that's showing up right now on your screen. It's not just a video. It's a continuation. A next step. A voice calling from the other side of survival saying, come with me, there's more to live for. So please, click the next video and keep walking with me. You've already come so far. Let's keep going. Together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. And above all, thank you for surviving.